Hello, my name is Paul Rogney, and I'm the host of the Drumming News Network. In recent years, handcrafted cymbals seem to be a growing market. Rob Cook of Rebeats, author and creator of the Chicago Drum Show, believes that handcrafted cymbals are the next frontier, much like the interest in custom drum manufacturing that took place in the early 1990s. May 20th and 21st of this year at the Chicago Drum Show, you will be able to meet and experience presentations on cymbal making from each of these cymbal craftsmen, and on the 21st, a panel of all the craftsmen together. The series of interviews that I am doing are literally a discovery as it happens. I purposely did not do I hardly did any research on each of these cymbal smiths ahead of time. I've custom built drums and my own drum hardware, but the idea of cymbal crafting is something that seems part voodoo, craftsmanship, and passion. Three things that I have no interest in when it comes to actually creating a cymbal. In each of these interviews, we get to see each of their own personalities, and like a true artist, even with similar approaches, their outcomes are completely different. On this episode, I speak with Matt Nolan of Nolan Custom. Using hammers, anvils, and fire, he creates fine musical instruments, percussion instruments such as cymbals, gongs, tam-tams, triangles, and other items. He creates instruments for drummers, percussionists, composers, symphony orchestras, touring and recording artists, and art collectors from all over the world. He believes making instruments as much by hand as possible gives them the most character and range of expression. In this episode, I am including video of him as he is shaping a cymbal, with him providing a step-by-step narrative of the cymbal making process. This will prove to be a very interesting episode, so let's get on with it. Matt, thank you so much for joining me today. This is exciting to get to know you. How are you doing?
Great, thank you. You're welcome. Good day so far.
Fantastic. Well, I've been watching some of your videos, and like I said, with everybody I've been talking to, I don't do a lot of research, so I didn't, but you're the first to send video. So I thought what we could do in this one is have you talk over a little bit and describe what's going on in the videos that we have.
Okay.
And then we'll get to that in a minute. First, I'd like to start with you, your history. So what initially got you into drumming and wanting to become a drummer?
Okay, so we're going back a bit. I guess at like junior school and the first couple of years of high school, I was singing in like the school choirs. That was about all the music I did, really. I wasn't particularly good at like piano keyboards or recorders like everyone had to play as a kid. Mm-hmm. Or even reading music. Wasn't particularly good at, reading dots. But we had such a fun time doing this. The sort of beginning of secondary school, high school there, the music teacher had already had this history of writing these musicals, like, big sort of console type musicals, 200 or so school kid choir plus a band of about 30, mostly a wind band, but then, with electric guitar, electric bass, acoustic guitar, other things thrown in here and there. The World Wildlife Fund had commissioned these as kind of environmental message musicals. So we'd go and perform them, and then the music would be published, and other schools all around the world would go and perform them. And I guess the kids learn and absorb things, and they also put the message out to whoever goes, watches it. It was kind of fun, kind of informative. The quality was pretty high. We were absolutely taskmastered for everything to be perfect and precise, super rehearsed. The choir was like organized in height order, so the rows of people were perfectly neat and clean. It wasn't all up and down.
Really?
It was like the full works.
OCD.
Rehearsed standing up and sitting down in unison, mm-hmm. All that kind of stuff. Rehearsals throughout the summer break, everything. And it was great fun. And I realized as I was getting sort of 14-ish, voice is starting to break. You're in that funny point where sometimes you're up here and sometimes you're down here, and like it's not a great time to be trying to sing, right? Maybe a bit later you'll be able to sing a baritone or tenor or whatever, but right in that point it's like, okay. But the musical we'd done as I sort of joined that school was all about Africa, and not so much the wildlife, but more the sort of social stuff of more tribal people coming into the cities and ending up stuck in shanty towns and all the economic problems, crime, and all this kind of stuff. But of course, being African based, there was lots of percussion in the band and the music. And I guess I'd been kind of standing behind them. In my position in the choir was more or less behind the band, and the back of the band where all the percussionists were. So, they're playing like real marimbas and African marimbas, Western marimbas and African marimbas, orchestral bass drums, drum set, all sorts of toms and bongos and everything. I thought, well, maybe I could play the drums, and these guys are going to be like graduating, leaving, going on to their next education. They're going to need more drummers. So actually 2 or 3 of my mates and I decided, okay, we're going to learn to play the drums. So music teacher taught us like after school, basically, like one evening a week. For a while, and we sort of got integrated into the sort of big band kind of thing they had, as well as the stuff for the musicals. And then I think maybe a little later, like the older kids were teaching us as well. So we'd get like sort of 2 nights a week, one of the music teachers and one with one of the, existing drummers. So we learned that way. We got involved, and did lots of playing there. We played, a couple of big concert halls in London, as well as like, the one in our local town. And we even got invited to the US, actually, to play in the Kennedy Center in Washington.
Oh, wow. That's pretty cool.
DC, with Sting, because he was big into like environmental rainforest stuff right around that time. And the World Wildlife Fund said, hey, can you come along? And so he kind of did the narrations. So there was like singing and music and songs and big choral pieces. And then in between, every now and again, there'd be a bit of narration to set the scene. Mm-hmm. So that was his role. He had like this armchair on the stage there and his, big list of notes, and he sort of read these narrations. I think he joined in on the last chorus for the encore or something as well. So he did a little bit of singing. Mm-hmm. So that was experience of a lifetime for someone who was probably 14, 15 years old, right, playing in front of like 5,000 people in a foreign country, it going down in a storm. And for once we didn't have to pack up the gear because it was all rented and other guys took it away. Usually percussionists are always there last, packing everything up, unloading, setting up, and all the reverse again. But this time it's like, no, just go and have your after show little snacks. Oh, wow. So fantastic. I guess that's how it started. And then like a sixth form college, which is, I think, equivalent to your last couple of years of high school, I think, like 16 to 18 years old. I was like in the college dance band, which is like a swing band, big band kind of thing, which again was a extracurricular thing. It was sort of, at lunchtimes, and then we'd do concerts various times of the year. I didn't study music formally. Okay. But that's also when I joined my, sort of popular rhythm combo, rock band kind of things with guitarists and all that kind of thing.
What kind of music were you playing as a drummer when you're playing out with your bands, like the rock bands?
So those first ones were, I guess, fairly heavy alt rock kind of stuff. Older stuff, Rolling Stones, Deep Purple, newer stuff like Marillion or what else did we play? Some originals. Mm-hmm. No, a mix. I think, what did we do? Oh, Metallica, I think.
Oh, really? Okay, that's cool.
I think we'd learned, like, within about 4 days of it being released, Unforgiven by Metallica, that song came out. Okay. Was it that one? No, sorry, Enter Sandman. Okay. So that's the first time I actually transcribed a drum part. Okay, what's he doing? All the fills and everything. So, yeah, that was in that band. And then later on, more... not quite Frank Zappa, but sort of comedic music, slightly complicated music, using humor as the excuse to play things a little more over the top. And then most recently in like a boogie woogie band, actually, or sort of piano blues, piano boogie, blending into a bit of jazz and sort of bringing in, like, not quite klezmer, but like Eastern European sort of scales and melodies and things, but in that sort of piano and harmonica, saxophone kind of mold, I guess. Because that was an interesting band because we didn't have a bass player, you know, it was kind of the pianist's left hand. So I made a kit that was very sort of lightweight and light sounding, so it didn't sound sort of out of place without a big thumping electric bass or a big upright. I actually made it from frame drums, like Remo tunable frame drums. So originally I had this 22 by 2-inch single-headed bass drum. Then I went down to an 18. They work better with like a double ply head.
Oh,
get
really?
A bit more thump. You just like put a mic on that, and the rest of it was acoustic, and it just worked quite nicely.
That's fantastic. So how did you anchor that drum when you're putting a pedal
Oh,
against it?
I sort of there are foot pedal attachments for putting cowbells and tambourines and things on.
Okay.
And there are also bass drum rim clamps for cowbells.
Mm-hmm.
So you put those two together, and you can clamp a frame drum onto a pedal. But I think on the 22, I put some like reins on it to the heel of the foot plate, just so it wouldn't flap too much. But on the 18, you didn't really need that. It was fine. You could lay into it actually.
Well, that's cool. I never would have thought of that. What kind of drum set were you using when you're playing in the rock band? You know, like, what kind of drum set's your favorite drum set, and kind of what's your setup normally?
Oh, right, okay. Well, that first set, or the first proper set I had was a Premier, I think Premier, as you say, over there.
Wait, how do you say proper? So we gotta learn your proper way of saying it. Premier.
Premier.
Okay.
That was like a 70s Elite, I think. That I bought off a colleague of my dad, work colleague of his at the time. But I think it had a pearl snare drum and a metal shell snare drum, which was, I don't know what the modern name of it is, but I think it's the one that Stuart Copeland used. But that came with the drum kit, but I really like the throw off on that. It just sort of comes away perpendicular to the drum. You can put it on with your leg while you're playing if you want to. So it's kind of helpful.
Okay. And then with that, would you use a lot of accessories or larger setup, or would it be a smaller setup that you just kind of?
So, I mean, that was a 5-piece. I was adding cymbals more than anything to it. You know, it kind of makes sense later in life.
Yes.
In retrospect, although I think early on I was making things out of like, the cardboard tubes that go in big rolls of carpet, like trying to make octobands out of those. Didn't work too well. And I think I was trying to make a rototom as well. I'd seen rototoms and thought, wow. And somehow my dad had like 2 big pulleys from like the back of washing machine drums. Probably 16-inch, I guess, diameter. And I thought, maybe with 2 of those and a bit of threaded bar and something, I can make myself a rototom. That also didn't work. Like, it kind of worked, but with my, whatever it would have been, 14-year-old, sort of engineering skills, it wouldn't take the tension. You'd start to tune the head up, and then the tension bolts would start ripping out of what was going on. So. But it was, so then I think I kind of used them like spokes, not knowing that Terry Bursley would use them like that as spokes, just these rims for bell-like sounds. So a few little extra bits on a normal drum kit, but nothing outlandish.
So that's fantastic about how you explore different ways of manufacturing, just different drums out of interest. I used to do the same thing, and I had many of the same failures you had. I didn't do the rototom thing, but I used a lot of cardboard tubes in hopes to be able to make octavans and expand my drum set, and it failed horribly. But one thing, so let's talk about the transition where you started kind of making your first cymbals, or what was it? The cymbal that you started with, or was it a different instrument you started manufacturing?
It was cymbals, yeah. I think I'd found this web forum on the internet called Cymbalholic, cymbalholic.com, that was around for a number of years. No longer around, but I think Facebook killed off a lot of those fora. It's just different kinds of social media made interacting more easy, I guess, but in a way you lost a lot of the sort of archiving and searchability of threads and information and stuff. But it was a golden age of internet for where nerds could find each other. Talk nonsense about cymbals. So I'd found that, and I think through that found a couple of independent cymbalsmiths. Steve Hubbard was sort of the closest to me, I guess, in terms of being a British person from Wales. Although he wasn't living there, he was living in Iceland at the time. And I'd seen some of his pictures of his works and thought, wow, that's amazing. You know, I hadn't never considered a cymbal as an artwork before, you know, just as a functional thing. And he'd sort of added this other layer to it. And then there was, you know, learning about Roberto Spizzichino in Italy, sort of, you know, the grand master in many people's eyes. And a couple of others. Was a guy in the States, Mike Skiba, and a guy in Belgium called Johan van der Siepe, I think. And those two were posting on the forum quite a bit, sort of how they did things and explaining, you know, what they thought about what makes a good cymbal and how to do it. It was interesting. They came from quite different angles. You know, Johan really wanted to start from like very clean, sort of, you know, Sabin or Zildjian, an existing cymbal, and rework it because he didn't like the unpredictability of the Turkish and, you know, similar kind of what's the word? Less technologically produced material, I guess.
Okay.
Whereas Mike was a lot more, no, you have to have that to get the sound. So interesting. Trying to learn little things from them. And then I think there was a contest. Someone said, hey, you know, we're all like cymbal nerds. Why don't we have this wonderfully grand title, the International Solo Cymbal Competition? Now, the idea with that was you would compose and perform a piece of music, play it on just one cymbal. It had to be no shorter than 1 minute, no longer than 2. And it had to be recorded in one take. You know, you can overdub things. I mean, you can have several takes at it, but just one complete take presented as the result.
Okay.
And they were uploaded. About 10 of us did it, I think. And then they were kind of anonymized, and people listened to them, voted on them. And I think a drum shop donated a cymbal or a voucher or something, and Johan donated a little cymbal. And I'd already made this thing that I called a cymbat. It was like a cymbal that had cracks and things in it that I bought on eBay for like £5, $5. Mm-hmm. It had like a paint splash on it and bad rivet holes and horrible cracks. And I cut all the cracks out and really like went overboard and made it into like the Batman logo, this shine in the sky.
Cool.
Out of a cymbal. Which then made it really sort of expressive. Like each ring had its own little tone and the head had a tone, and I sort of put a tail on it, even though bats don't actually have a tail. And sort of the wing scoops, you can kind of rattle sticks in them and have all these different playing possibilities. So I thought, this is perfect for my entry in this competition. And I think that's where it suddenly changed, because then people were asking, oh, can you make me one of those? So then rather than me just tinkering with bent and broken bits of cymbal and cutting shapes, I started doing it more, started buying sheet metal, started figuring out how do you actually reshape it with a hammer rather than just cutting shapes. Learned a little bit from Steve Hubbard with that, because I think I got one to make a cymbat out of. And I cut it and it just flipped inside out. So I was like, oh, now what do I do? So I understand I need to shape it and retension it with hammers, but I don't know how. So he was in Wales for a couple of months, which isn't far from Bath, where I am. And he was trying to sell a lot of his cymbals on this Cymbaholic forum with like, sometimes not even a photograph. He just have a description of them. No sound files. And I thought, right, I've got this recording gear. I've got a camera. I'll come see you, photograph, record all your stuff. We can put it on the website. You'll sell more of them that way. And in return, just show me a little bit of how you do it. So I guess, yeah, that's kind of how it started. And it just got bigger and bigger and bigger. I got more and more obsessed with it.
Well, that sounds so fantastic. What a way to get into it. One thing I'm really shocked about, in comparison to like a lot of the drumsmiths or boutique drum manufacturers, there's a lot of camaraderie within the cymbal world, right now with you guys crafting cymbals. I think that's fantastic. Can you speak a little bit about that family? What brings you people together?
That's a good question. Well, I'll just take a right angle for a second. There was another forum, the Mike Dahlberg Drum Forum, and
yes.
A bunch of people from there got together every year at a drum show, like that was in Birmingham, and we'd have a curry dinner afterwards. You know, a bunch of people with just drums in common, and I think I stayed overnight with a friend of mine who lived nearby. He's a guitarist in a band I was in at university, and he came out with us to this curry, and his observation was, guitarists are like cats, drummers are like dogs. You all get along together. You're not sort of preening or sort of in competition. I thought that's a good observation. But I think maybe, yes, like you're drawing a distinction between drum builders and cymbal smiths. I think maybe with cymbal smiths, there's even more of that goes on. I'm not sure why. Maybe because sort of traditionally there were only the big 3 or 4 companies. And so sort of as an individual, you're very small, and it kind of works better to be all helping each other as these individual people. And I guess we all come at it from a different angle as well. Everyone has their own style. So in a way, we're not in competition with each other. You know, so what's good for one of us is good for all of us. More awareness in the general public, which is still pretty low, of the fact there are independent cymbal smiths, one-man cymbal companies. Yeah, we all get along. We all sort of we keep little secrets back, but we share a lot as well.
Well, you gotta keep a little trade secret now.
Yeah.
So some cymbal makers start with a Turkish blank. Others start with an ingot. I noticed in some of your videos that we'll watch in a little bit, it looks like you're actually starting some of your cymbals from, just flat pieces of metal.
Yes.
How are you making your cymbals?
Right. So I use cymbal blanks from various different places, chosen partly for the different sounds they're capable of producing, and also the different ways they can be worked. So I do use some sheet metal stuff, so B8 and B15 discs that I get from Germany, and they're flat, which is very nice, and they're round. They more or less have a smooth edge. Turkish blanks are more like a giant potato chip or a poppadom or something. They're wavy. They're rarely round. They've got sharp edges. Usually they've got jagged edges. And if you don't use them fairly quickly, you need to retemper them. They're always constantly getting harder with age. So, yeah, sometimes I'm using Chinese material, sometimes Turkish, sometimes more recently I've been getting some Japanese stuff from Koide, the Japanese cymbal company. They have some B23 and 23 with other things in, fancy alloys that have a very bright sound, which I wanted for a certain orchestral sort of crash pairs of cymbals.
Okay.
So, yeah, selecting different types of blanks for different purposes, really. But I guess I started out with the flat stuff because that's all I could get.
Okay.
I guess I learnt my trade to a certain extent with those types of materials. But then, then I had to almost relearn. Okay, what do you do with this wavy, really hard stuff that doesn't want to cooperate as much as the perfectly uniform, stress-free sheet metal does.
So you had talked a little bit about the tempering of the cymbal. I when I've talked to some of your craftsmen of these cymbals, it's amazing on how many different types of techniques go into it. And I was just wondering, at this moment, can we take a little bit of time to look at some of your videos? I'm going to try to step them in order of how you're making the cymbal. And then you could talk a little bit about what's going on within the video. So I'll just cue those up.
Okay, sure.
So can you step us through the process on this video right now?
Okay, yeah. So in the big black thing to my left, that you're kind of looking down on, there's a cymbal blank in there at the moment that's heating up, being held at a temperature. I'm about to take it out and throw it into the water tank that's behind me, cool it down quickly. But I was just heating the tongs up there so they don't cool it when I grab it. That's what I was doing on the floor. Here comes the blank. As you can see, it's red hot. And it will make quite a good noise when it goes in the water. So what happens there basically is I'm setting the crystal structure of the metal as if it's at that high temperature. By cooling it very quickly, it doesn't have time to sort of readjust. So that's what makes it softer to be able to hammer it without it cracking. So in the Turkish foundries and at Zildjian and Sabian and UFIP everywhere else, they'll be doing this right before they press the cups and then again before they start the hammering process. So only drying off and cleaning up, and then I'll be able to start hammering it.
How many times do you have to do that? Is that just like a one-time deal?
Usually just a one-time deal, yes. With that Japanese material I was talking about, they've made that to be essentially hot stamped and a little bit of hammering on the top afterwards.
Okay.
They didn't think I'd be able to hand hammer it without it breaking.
Got it.
So I did temper that multiple times, sort of hammered it in maybe 3 stages, re-tempering each time. Although when you do that, it doesn't retain its shape. It kind of droops a bit and goes wavy again. But you still get some of the cup more or less stays the same. And the sort of the stretching of the profile that you put in stays there, but the shape kind of deforms a bit. So you've always got to kind of recover it, I guess, after a re-tempering.
Well, then the next step, wouldn't that be forming the cup?
And hammering the cup, yeah. That would come next.
Okay.
So sometimes I stand at my anvil and raise it up, and sometimes I'm sitting down, but today I'm standing up, which is much better for my back. I've put the cymbal anvil on top of the gong anvil to raise it up like that. So I've got a hardened steel top on top of a wooden stump, and I'm basically hammering concentric circles. You can see I'm turning the cymbal while I'm hammering, sort of building them up, moving in and out, stretching the shape from flat into more of a dome. I don't know if you've ever ridden on a train for a long time, like looking out the window, and when you stop, it seems like the background's moving backwards, opposite to where you were, because your brain has started doing all the motion correction.
Yeah.
When I'm looking at that cup and turning it and hammering it, when I stop, the middle of the room is going the other way.
That's weird.
It's really strange.
Well, with that too, I noticed you had a whole bunch of marked out circles concentrically throughout the cymbal. Is that how you form the bow?
That's just to guide my eye, really, to make sure I'm doing it fairly evenly at the same radius. I have a couple on the bow and lots of them in the bell. Well, it's interesting. I spent my first years as a cymbal smith trying to make my bells absolutely perfect, superbly round. And then I've sort of spent the second half then deliberately misshaping them or deforming them a little bit to break up the sound, to make it a little broader.
Okay. Again, another video here of you making, hammering the cymbal or the bow of the cymbal.
Okay. Yeah, so I tend to start with, I think, what many cymbal smiths will call the spokes method. So I'm kind of radiating out in straight lines. At the beginning, I start a bit like tuning a drum head, sort of, going opposite and then at 90 degrees to try and keep it more balanced rather than just going around in order like I am now a little later on. This just allows me to put the basic sort of skeleton in of a gentle dome. And then I'll move into more like the bell hammering, sort of going round and round in circles rather than going out in spokes. But this is just a means of starting out even and balanced. Making sure you don't hammer too much in one spot.
That's just amazing. Just all the steps that go into a cymbal, and you got one individual doing it versus machinery. This last step here is interesting, which actually kind of completes the form of the cymbal with your lathing. So it's a little bit longer video, and so we got to play that one because this is really cool.
Okay, so you can see a lot more hammering on that now than there was earlier. Yes, I've done some of this point of view, so see what it looks like to lay the cymbal. Shavings on the floor there.
Well, so that mount behind it, is that a pad you have?
Yeah, so it's on like a wooden shaped former, but I find that's a little too solid. So I have a little pad that has a little bit of give in it.
Okay.
So it helps with things like sometimes you see that lathe chatter on a cymbal where it really looks almost serrated. You get that when you get like a vibration building up, like a resonance, and with the pad in there, it helps stop that happen.
So as you're taking off the little, just a little bit of metal, how do you plan that out? Is that just something that comes with experience, or what do you do?
Yeah, it's more or less something that comes with practice. Getting a feel for it. Obviously, the outside edge of the cymbal is moving linearly faster than the middle. So even if you lathed perfectly evenly, you would end up with a taper. You'd remove more material from the edge. For a crash cymbal, you'd probably want to exaggerate that and deliberately remove more from the edge anyway. So the bell's thicker and the edge of the cymbal is thinner. For some ride cymbals, you might do that as well. For orchestral crash cymbals, you're probably going to try to keep them more or less the same thickness all the way across, just because of the different way they're used and the different sound they want from them. But lathing, as well as controlling thickness and taper, you can also adjust the tension a little bit depending on how hard you press and how much lathing you do from the top and how much lathing you do from the bottom, the balance of it.
Okay.
Then there are more subtle things about the exact finish of the lathing, if it's like little pin lines or it's deep grooves. Change the overtones a little bit, the balance of them, and change the stick sound a little bit. But it's fairly, small percentages, really.
Well, so the top side of that cymbal, is that a finish that you're going to have on the cymbal for that one specifically?
I think on that one I did keep that finish. Yes. Yeah. So that's unlathed on the top. And they were a set of blanks that were really kind of almost like red wine color. I thought, I've got to keep this. Is lovely. I've got to keep this. And different than what you usually see. I think I may have just pushed it with a piece of wood to kind of smear the surface a little bit and give it that bit of sheen.
Okay.
Maybe put a bit of oil on it as well. I can't remember. I'm always changing things up, always trying different things. So I can't say for sure what I did in that video. How long? So it varies, anything from 2 hours to 2 days, really, depending on the size and type of the cymbal, whether you're just aiming for a nice cymbal or something very specific, trying to match a sound, or making an orchestral pair where the two of them have to go together very well, and operate over a huge dynamic range. So every little thing needs to be just right. I guess that's 2 days elapsed time. Active time. There will be periods where you leave the cymbal to rest, or periods where it's in the oven. Come back to it after a couple of days, see how it's sounding, hear how it's sounding. Right after you've hammered it, it's all really tight and gnarly and quite dead sounding sometimes.
Okay.
But after a few days to a week or two, it really starts to open up and all the high frequencies come out more, and you can hear really where it's going. Maybe it might need a little, 2 or 3 more hammer marks just to adjust tiny little things.
What causes that to happen? Like, what's molecularly what's going on inside the metals?
Crystal grain boundaries are moving.
Okay.
I tend to use an analogy of like if you're a weightlifter or a sports person or whatever, and you're all stiff, like after you've torn a lot of muscles, and you get a massage, and it's like, oh, that's better. It's like time gives the cymbal a massage.
Okay.
Basically, all the crystals of the cymbal, and they sort of re-knit. It's amazing. It really just sounds just like turn all the treble down when it's freshly made, and it just slowly opens up. Yeah. Depending on how heavily you've worked it, it can come back in half an hour. It's like, okay, great. I know that's going to be fine. Other times it might be a couple of days, and it's still got a bit further to go before I can be sure it's got to be okay. But before this, I guess you've got to have had enough experience to know roughly how it is going to sound while you're making it, to get the shape right and choose the weight, choose the diameter, choose the profile, how the tension is in it. So that, because you can't hear immediately what it's doing, you can only hear a guide towards what it's doing based on what you know from having made them before. It's kind of interesting. I think Johann used to use the phrase listening into the future.
Wow, that's kind of
what
cool.
cymbal smiths have to do.
Very poetic. So you're talking about crystal grain structure. Have you ever buried your cymbals in dirt to try to draw that out?
No, I have not done that. I do a chemical patina to make a cymbal look like it's old. It dries the sound out a teeny tiny amount and brings the stick out a tiny amount. I don't know if any of those burying things, if they work. I mean, I think you have to leave it in the ground for a couple of years really to do anything.
Oh, that long, you think? Okay.
Yeah. So I know. I don't know who did it first. It might have been one of the Turkish companies, and then I think Sabian did. Like buried a whole crate of them, made a big thing about it.
I always thought it was a joke, but it really does work. It's amazing how it does modify the sound of that cymbal.
Yeah, I think probably like chemical stuff on the surface will change things a little bit. Maybe temperature swings as well. Lots of those over a year or so will do things. Just not playing it for a year will be different from playing it for a year. Some people advocate, you've got a new cymbal and it's a bit sort of stiff, not quite open enough. Like they say, like put earplugs in and just like do rolls on it with big sticks or big mallets, like half an hour every day for a week kind of thing.
Oh, okay.
And that will make a difference too.
So I know you will create a cymbal for like an orchestra per order. So what's the conversation like when they approach you of saying, hey, we want a couple of orchestral cymbals? What do they ask you? How was that discussion like back and forth?
Right. Well, this is the perennial problem of putting sound into words that makes sense to both parties. But usually we'll go with a starting point. So some cymbals I've made before, or some cymbals they already have, or cymbals they found in a YouTube video, and then say, okay, like this, but deeper, or like this darker, like this brighter, like these, but as if they were 17s instead of 19s, that kind of thing. So, differences relative to a known thing, or they'll quote a weight. They'll say, I want them around 2,300 grams. And that'll give me an idea. Or they'll say, I want them for Mahler 10, or I want them for Rachmaninoff's piano thing, or, so, very different cymbals for those things. Sadly, I don't know that much about that. I need to up my classical repertoire knowledge, really. It's all part of the learning process, working with, orchestral people and getting those bits of feedback and doing bits of research.
So just a general question, how do you think you cymbal craftsmen have impacted the cymbal industry of some of the larger production companies?
Oh, well, I mean, I definitely saw things happening, changes towards more individual lines and things that were a bit more differentiated. You'd see maybe designs or styles of design that I'd done or other independent guys had done cropping up in some of the Turkish companies. You think,
really? Wow.
That's a that's from that Betty sort of, hey, that mine. So yeah, you see like visual ideas being taken on, some sonic ideas as well. On the other end of things, the big companies have kind of done almost everything already anyway at some point. And there's only so much reinvention and variation you can do within the world of cymbals, I guess, before it becomes very much an effect cymbal that is fashionable for 6 months, and then they're on to the next one. So I started out very much trying to do completely new, completely different, what other sounds can you do, kind of thing. That was fascinated me for quite a while. But gradually I was finding it was the more normal things, just like good quality normal things, that were the things that were selling more. I still make the peculiar way out things and the very arty things from time to time. There are still customers that want that, but a lot more of my work now is fairly normal looking and sounding cymbals. It's interesting from where I started.
Well, one thing that's interesting to me in regards to the economy of material and material availability right now is the significant increase in metals over the last year and a half, especially precious metals and import taxes. How has that impacted you? Have you seen a significant increase in the last couple of years in material costs?
One of my Turkish suppliers doubled his blank cost.
Wow.
Last year, which was a bit of a shock. I heard on the grapevine that B8 now is as expensive as B20 as a raw material.
Wow.
So it's getting difficult to justify its use as a budget line in the big companies. Prices have gone up, shipping times have gone up. Duties, I've not had much of a problem with, unless they're just factored into the prices already. I know, like sending cymbals, most places that there aren't duties on cymbals per se. I'll get charged like UK sales tax if I buy a lot of blanks from Turkey, but it's 20%. It's not too bad, and that's always been the case.
Okay.
Yeah, overall materials price absolutely shot up. Yeah, huge.
Well, also material availability is becoming a problem too, and also some elements that go within the materials. Have you heard anything about that in relationship to cymbal manufacturing and cymbal material availability? Availability. I can't say the word. Sorry.
Not so much. I mean, I think other than the price, I know like copper is one of the most recycled materials we have. Everything, all the copper that came out of the ground ever, 95% of it is still being used. It just gets reused and reused. It's not as energetically efficient as reusing aluminum. But yeah, copper is used all the time, reused. I don't know I guess we must be running out of it. There's only so much in the ground left, and we use more and more of it. And perhaps the issue is more with tin. I don't know. I know there are still mines in Cornwall here in the UK where they have tin, but it's remains not economically worth it to extract it right now. But it may become so in the future. The prices keep going up.
So is it just that it costs too much just to ore out and they can't get the price for it? Because I thought tin was in high demand for multiple different types of metals. Is that not the case?
I'm not, to be honest, I don't know. I know there are more issues with like heavy metals and rare earth metals.
Okay.
The availability of them, I think, certainly with all the projections for what we'll need for, like, decarbonizing industry and all that kind of thing, and using more solar panels, using more wind turbines and stuff. There are going to be problems extracting those materials, having enough of it to do that. But I haven't seen anything just with basic copper tin, silver, zinc, those kind of things. Maybe I'm unaware. Maybe I'm gonna suddenly find out and go, oh my God.
The reason why I ask all that specifically is I've seen with different industries, and specifically with mine, I work in engineering, and the availability of specific materials, elements, the taxes for precious metals, at least in the U.S., has significantly gone up. And the cost of aluminum in the last, I'll say 24 months has almost gone up 7 times in cost here.
Wow.
So, yeah, it's ridiculous. And I also heard I heard that different elements and different metals were in short supply, and I didn't know if that was long-term, short-term, or if not. So I'm just trying to hammer that down to just out of interest for myself.
It could still be the sort of ongoing ramifications of like the pandemic and that big blockage in the Suez Canal that happened a year or two ago.
I forgot about that.
That just like messed up everything, because the whole world runs on just in time now. There are no big warehouses for stuff all along the path anymore. So when you get a blockage in a system like that, it takes a long time for everything to get back to normal again. So it may still be things to do with that. And I know a lot of those precious metals and rare earths and things come from China and places like that, which are less politically inclined to be helpful at the moment. So.
I want to move on a little bit quickly here. You make so many different types of instruments. I want to have people aware of all that you do, because we're getting on a little bit, and I don't want to take up much of your time, and I just want to have people learn about so much of what you do. And gongs are something that I love, and you are making them from scratch. They're just amazing instruments. I'm going to play up your video here again, if you wouldn't mind just talking a little bit about the process of making a gong.
So this was commissioned by like almost a TV channel here in the UK. They wanted kind of a Eastern philosophy kind of looking logo, putting on a gong that they could have in their studio.
So will that end up being like a 28 inch gong or 30?
I think it's a 32.
32, maybe? Okay. And then what alloy is that?
So that is nickel silver, which is an alloy of copper, zinc, and nickel. So I get it as a flat disc from Germany. And here I'm blowtorching the edge to soften that material up. Just doing a little bit of straightening so everything's warped. And then the joy of very many heavy hammer blows to bend that collar around. There's a hollow in the wooden stump there that I'm hammering into. And you can see the backrest kind of comes up, so I don't need someone to hold it for me. I can do it by myself, just change the angle as I go. You basically form a big beer bottle cap and then try to remove the wrinkles from it.
Okay.
In a way, you're kind of making a metal drum. That's kind of acting as the shell of the drum, the thing against which you pull the tension in the face. It's kind of what I'm doing here. I'm putting tension in that face, also getting it flat rather than dished inwards. On a lot of my gongs, I put like relief hammering in the center or somewhere. This one is just plain, more or less, besides this hammering for sound and structure. The decoration on this is done, we'll see in a minute, with engraving.
Okay.
I'm going to do a little sort of stress relief heating here. This is something you can do with nickel, silver, and B8. You can't do it with B20. So this is accelerating the back massage, basically, rather than having to wait.
Okay.
With a little heat to coax it along.
You know, I always thought that the shininess came from polishing. That comes actually from the heating.
Oh, no, it was shiny before I started, but you're just seeing it in the reflection there.
Okay.
I think it's bringing it out. So now I'm actually going to clean off some of the oxide that was put on by the flame there to give me a nice reactive surface to darken with a chemical. Try to get a nice, relatively even black background. And yeah, transferring marks on and doing a lot of engraving. I'm trying not to put fingerprints on it while I'm doing it as well.
Do you coat your instruments after you're done?
Some of them, yeah. This one got a lacquer
Okay.
to preserve it. The cymbals I tend not to, but some of the gongs I do, and some of the things with, you know, more decorative finishes like this, I'll put some kind of lacquer or sealant on, just to stop them, you know, oxidizing or getting really bad fingerprinting and stuff.
Wow, that sounds beautiful.
Thank you very much. So it's got the text and then like an Eclipse logo that I'd done on a previous gong that they liked and they wanted to include. Yeah, there's a few days of work there.
That must give you an incredible satisfaction when you're done with the gong. I mean, it's such a different instrument than a cymbal, and it just, everybody loves gongs. I love gongs. So do you tune the gong? You know, like some, like Peisty tunes the gongs. Other cymbal makers and gong makers, they don't necessarily tune them, but they will design in deep or high end tones. I think, is that? Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, I guess most of the gongs like that I make, they don't have a specific tuning. Unlike, you know, the Peisty ones, they're like this precise hertz and, you know, this A sharp or whatever for you know, specific purposes.
Mm-hmm.
I do make some tuned gongs, but they're more like the Thai ones that are very sort of focused and pure sounding, bell-like almost.
Mm-hmm.
But for those sort of larger, big, whooshy, in orchestral terms, they're known as tam-tams, but colloquially gongs, you know, they're all gongs. I concentrate more on getting the overall tone of the thing working nicely. So it's sort of speaking in the best way, really, the most responsive way. And there's a pitch range that works for that, depending on the diameter of the gong and the thickness and sort of how large you make the face. And way higher than that, way lower than that, it just doesn't work very well. It's not a cohesive sound.
Mm-hmm.
Similar with the cymbal, I guess, although with the cymbal, sometimes you deliberately try to split, like the stick sound from the wash. Mm. So sometimes you are aiming for two separate sounds in a cymbal almost, whereas with a gong, you really want this sort of very together sort of whole sound where the spectrum is fairly linearly filled. You know, so it doesn't have like lots of woof and then nothing and then some fizz on the top. You know, you get a lot of middle filled as well. On another one where I'd hammered quite a strong relief emblem into it, it was really crazy sounding. Like, oh no, it's a bit too wacky, and it just took some other little hammer strokes just to sort of bring it in a bit. Not so far that it was super clean uniform, but just so the craziness was a bit more tamed. Mm-hmm. So it's always a judgment, you know. Is it finished? Is this how it should be? Should I do some more? Should I make it a bit cleaner? Should I make it a bit gnarlier?
So the gong you're referring to in the video we watched earlier, there was a gong in the background that looked like a medical insignia.
That's the one.
Front. Okay, that's the one.
Yeah.
Wow, that is just unbelievable how you could pound that in there. And I just, it's interesting to me, how does that augment the sound of the gong if you hit that specifically?
Any sort of raised surface in the middle is going to give it a little more focus, a little more of a pitch.
Oh,
you know,
okay.
sort of underneath that wash. But an irregular shape is also going to give it lots of funky tones and things. Actually, the best place for striking that one with that insignia on is more or less right in the middle, like just a little bit below. Normally, with a tam-tam like that, you'd be striking a couple of inches below the middle. Mm-hmm. But that one works more or less dead in the center, I guess, because of that raised element.
All right. Well, I want to play one more video. And this is a Bjork video I talked about that I can't pronounce the rest of it. I was wondering.
Gamalest. Gamalest Celeste. Gamalest.
And this will be the last video, but I find this so fascinating. All these different instruments that you do that are all specifically tuned in. Just wondering if you could walk us through some of this video as well.
Okay, sure. So started off in my workshop in Bath, making all these little tone bars, like glockenspiel bars, basically from bronze. And then later, I should go out to Iceland to meet up with the pipe organ maker who was building like the cabinet and the mechanism for it. This was on such a tight schedule. You probably saw a friend of mine helping out drilling holes in the bars just then. He's actually the cameraman for this whole thing as well.
Okay.
So here we are in Iceland with Björgvin, the pipe organ maker. So he's taken like all the mechanism from an old Schiedmeier German Celeste. He's put it in a new cabinet, and we've swapped out the steel bars for these bronze ones that I've made. And we've swapped out the felted hammers for like hard boxwood hammers.
Okay.
To make it sound more like this Indonesian gamelan style of music. I had to retune and remake about an octave and a half of the bars in Iceland, because once we got them on the instrument, they weren't sounding right. There are resonators underneath, a bit like on a marimba or a xylophone, and they're really changing some of the timbre of the bars. So somewhere, I think it was like around the middle octave, it just didn't seem to be flowing. The sound wasn't progressing naturally. It felt like there was a step in it. In fact, what that was, I'd made them in two different thicknesses, 3mm and 2mm thick.
Okay.
I essentially moved where that crossover point was a bit further up the keyboard to make it sound more homogeneous. There's Björgvin testing it out. So it has a manual keyboard, and it has some electromagnetic actuators as well, so you can play it over a MIDI cable. You can play it with another keyboard, or you can play it with the computer. Very much enjoyed that.
That is just unbelievable. The sheer number of instruments that you do, including hammers. I mean, that's usually a really specified instrument craftsman just for that alone. So how broad are you with your interests, and are you more driven by problem solving or recreating an instrument?
You've hit the nail on the head there. Problem solving. I love challenges, solving problems, improving something. Having said that, as you also said, recreating things. I've ended up with a fair amount of work the past few years recreating things like 100, 200-year-old triangles that an orchestra has one of, that they're frightened that it'll get lost, broken, or it'll play out. And so they kind of want a fairly accurate replica of it that they can use for most of the gigs, and then they'll use that one on the Christmas concert or whatever.
Wait, just 1 second. I got back here.
Percussion students, they all want that sound, so they're buying copies of this triangle. Same with some cymbals, especially Spizzichinos. Sadly, a lot of those have a habit of breaking, like shattering like glass after a couple of years of playing. But the sound was so exquisite, people, want it recreating or as best can be done. So sometimes I'll be making a mate for an existing, surviving cymbal. The one broke, I make a replacement that fits with it, or sometimes recreating whole pairs.
Okay.
Done the same with a couple of jazz ride cymbals. I guess that in itself is a problem-solving exercise. That's why I sought out that Japanese alloy to get the brighter sound, to try to get the Spizzichino shimmer without the cymbal having this brittle issue. So I eventually figured out what he'd been doing with heat treatment, and it's like it's inevitable. This cymbal is going to break. It sounds fantastic for a while, but it's going to break because again, crystalline structure stuff, like they were cracking not between the crystal grain boundaries, but straight through the crystal grains. So I don't know if you see a cracked cymbal, usually the cracks look like lightning, zigzag, splitty things. The Spizzichinos crack like porcelain. It's like gentle arcs.
Oh, wow.
It's like, wow. So it's like, okay, so I can't do what he was doing to try to get the sound, because then we'll have the same problem. But the thing I noticed about them was that the high frequencies sustain a lot longer than if you just take an ordinary Turkish blank and make a cymbal from it. Partly it was in the shape, but partly it was beyond what you could just do with shape and tension and weight and lathing and everything else. So I'd learned about these Japanese alloys. They had the extra tin, and then they got tiny bits of zirconium and titanium, I think, in there, just like 0.1%. That just makes it a much harder structure. Gives you that brightness. But it comes with working problems. You can't hand hammer it very easily, because it does get hard quite quickly. So then, I was doing the multiple tempering.
I just have to back you up one step, though. And I can't almost stop laughing about this one. The proverbial triangle, you know what I mean? So what makes a special good triangle versus, somebody standing up and at the end just going ting? I mean,
it is funny, isn't it? Because it's always been like the school band joke instrument. The kid who has no talent at all still has to be part of it. So they give him the triangle to play, and he or she, and they play it at the wrong time, and it sounds terrible. And it is the joke instrument, isn't it? But then you'll get these orchestral players that they have 25 different triangles, and they've all got this special something about them, and they'll use this one for this piece, and they use that one for that piece, and maybe if they're touring and they're in a different hall, actually they'll switch the triangle because the hall sounds different and that one's not quite working. One percussionist, an American guy, but he plays in a Norwegian orchestra, said to me, well, it's the fairy dust on the top of the orchestra. You're the sound that makes the other people sound great. Like the harps do this run, or the flute does a trill, and there's this little extra sparkle right on the top triangle that makes them look fantastic. So people will pay $200-300 for a really good triangle, whereas that one kid in school band was playing was like a piece of bent aluminum for $5 or something. But it's ridiculous. It's just a bent piece of metal, but the right metal bent the right way, maybe with some hammering on it, with some heat treatment to it. It's quite fascinating.
It really
how
is.
Obsessed I've become with not really that much interest in them originally with triangles.
Well, it's a
and
special artist
making different variations on them. So what if I try this? What if I try that? What if I do this to the bar before I bend it? Just incrementally pushing in different directions, I guess. Can we make a really dark triangle, a really sparkly triangle, or really articulate triangle? One of the things you're generally trying to avoid in an orchestral triangle is a strong notion of what the pitch is. You want it to have lots going on so that it will sound fine in G major or C minor or whatever key the orchestra's in. It won't clash. It won't sound like it's super in tune. So you're trying to get a broad sound from something that, by the physics of it, really wants to have a pitch. So you're always trying to subvert that one way or another.
See, it's amazing. Any professional who is into any instrument, there is such a level of intensity and understanding that people sometimes will just simply play off as a joke. But what I was just, and I'll leave this alone now, but what I'm envisioning is like a Saturday Night Live episode where a guy has a box full of triangles. That's his whole lifestyle. No, anyways, no, that's fantastic. I really appreciate that, because it's just it's a good understanding of all the different types of instrumentation, and just all the amazing art and skill and craftsmanship you put into your instruments. I'm really excited what's coming up with the Chicago Drum Show. You're going to be giving a presentation, I think, on a Saturday, and on Sunday you're going to be part of a panel. What can we expect from the presentation?
About eight of us, I think, are all going to be giving an individual presentation, and then in this panel session. And I think at least more than half of us will have booths as well, so you'll be able to check out a load of our instruments.
So what will your presentation be? Will you be crafting a cymbal or talking about cymbals, do you think?
I haven't decided yet what it's going to be. It might be worth conferring with the other guys, actually, to try So we each present something different in a way, or a different aspect of cymbal making. You don't want us all saying, "Oh, this is how I make a cymbal," or "This is what I think a cymbal should be." Yeah, I'm not sure, because I asked Rob Cook, like, well, what kind of thing do you want? Do you want it to be about this or about that? And he just said, well, whatever you want it to be about, or however best you want to present your business, or the history of something, or whatever. So, yeah, it's real broad, brief. And yeah, I haven't figured it out yet. I mean, the last time I gave a presentation was in Germany, which was all about, I guess, being an independent craftsperson or an independent business, figuring out that you don't have to be a big factory to do these things, but certainly not these days with the internet communication, just being able to email someone in Turkey or China or wherever and getting some materials, and you can learn how to do it and learn how to market yourself, all that. It was, I guess, from that angle, that talk. So maybe it'll be like that. Maybe it'll be something else. I don't know. I will spend some time planning it and come up with something worth listening to, I hope.
Well, you've been completely engaging. I've enjoyed every moment that I've had with you today, and I'm sure every person watching right now will too. And I know it'll be exciting what you do. I just want to encourage everyone to go to the Chicago Drum Show to see him, see you present, see the panel, and learn more about handcrafted cymbals, which is just a fascinating and growing market out there today. So,
yeah, it's just like mushrooming. I guess there's so many more people doing it now. Doing their own little thing, their own takes on the craft, and yeah, there'll be 8 or 9 of us there, I think, as well as all the other great booths with the vintage drum sets, custom drum sets, big brand cymbals, the whole deal. It's a great show.
So, Matt, thank you so much again for your time. This has been fantastic. And do you have anything you want people to know about you, how to get in contact with you, to purchase instruments from you?
All right, yeah. Some point between now and Chicago, I'm going to update my website because it's about 10 years old and a bit clunky. But it is mattnolancustom.com. You can also find me on Facebook, YouTube, Instagram on that same handle, Matt Nolan Custom, MattNolan Custom, Matt Nolan Custom. That's about it, I guess. People tend to buy directly from me. Steve Weiss Music carry my triangles in the States, and a couple of other instruments. But generally, people are ordering very specific, I want a cymbal like this, cymbal like that. So I don't really do cymbals through stores at the moment. It doesn't make much sense.
Oh, fantastic. Thank you very much.
Yeah, you're welcome. Thank you.
This has been a production of the Drumming News Network. All rights reserved. All media is owned by the respective parties. This episode cannot be distributed or copied in any form. Please visit drummingNewsNetwork.com daily to keep up on all the latest drumming news. Copyright 2023.